New interview drop. Where the f is it? So this was another IRL interview at something. Where were they? This looks like the same place Ian was at. Different room, but Gamescom. Was Gamescom in EU or did Naguura fly to NA? Oh, it was in Germany. That's hype. All right, let's hear it.
Hello everyone, my name is Naguura and I'm here at Gamescom with game producer George Valef and production director Michael Bybee. There we go. Thank you so much for joining me.
I really like both of them. George is actually a OG Midwinter raider. So he actually has like Race to World first level experience back when he played. This was like 10 years ago, I think. And Bybee, I wasn't familiar with him until recently, but he did a lot of the Q&A for like the early alpha stuff. And he seems like just someone who's generally super fucking on top of it. So big fan of both of them.
Me and answering some of my questions, hopefully. We'll see.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
What is it? One guy taking 3/4 of the couch for no reason? Y'all don't gotta be weird like that. They're just sitting down.
To maybe answer your questions.
We'll see. All right, so my first question, if you can start straight away. My question is about normal and heroic week, because for a while in Dragonflight, we had released normal and heroic raids at the same time with Mythic.
So true.
But now we're going back to having the normal and heroic week before Mythic releases a week after. And when that was the case the last time, you made sure, or you told us that you wouldn't be doing any major balancing changes without announcing it beforehand. Is that something you plan on doing again? Or is your approach going to be different this summer?
So I do have some information on this. I'm sure they'll go over it now, but I actually heard it. They posted about this in the Race World First Discord. Someone basically asked, you know, they used to, just as she said, she's right. They used to keep, they said they used to make changes light because they don't want you gearing up a million characters in heroic based on the information they give you. And then they pull the rug out from under you and nerf that class or buff some random class. And now you don't have enough time to react to that. Like the day before Mythic. But I think what they said this time is like, obviously that would be great if they could do that, but I think I could maybe even find a direct quote. Actually, I don't think I'm supposed to directly quote this Discord. It doesn't matter. It's information to the top guilds. Why wouldn't that be able to be said publicly? I don't think it's weird either way. I think the response was, I don't think we can responsibly commit to no major changes. We'll do whatever we think is best for the health of the overall game during that week, but our goal is always that only minor adjustments will be necessary, and we certainly keep in mind the decisions you guys are making during the race and stuff like that. But which is actually a good answer, I think. Like, honestly, if something's like super fucked, like a class is way too good or a class is way too bad, I think Blizzard being like, oh, because of the race, we can't make too many major changes. I do think that's bad. Like, I think you should have the balance be as close as you can. Obviously, going into Heroic Week, it would be great if classes weren't super insane or super dog shit, but I feel like for the overall health of the game, that is the correct answer. I think that's exactly what they should, even from someone in the Race World First. Like, it'd be so stupid if, like, tuning was horrible or something, and they were like, well, we promised the race guilds we wouldn't do big changes, and then it's, like, horrible fucking tuning for everyone, you know? So, think that's a good change. Let's see if they have a similar answer here to what they've posted about this.
Generally, when we do things like normal heroic week into the Mythic week, we do use that information to sort of guide decisions for, you know, classes or specs that are maybe underpowered or overpowered. That being said, when we do these changes, we're very conscious of the fact that some players level, you know, 5, 10, 15 characters. We don't want to try to, you know, massively upset the meta. So when we do, you know, approach these conversations for tuning, our goal really is to do very slight adjustments for things that are overperforming and not really do too much more than that, because players have spent time making their characters, gearing their characters up as well. We don't want to sort of, you know, take the time away. So in terms of tuning updates and sort of timeline, you know, it is planned to do updates before Mythic Week and before Heroic Week, depending on the data that we get. That being said, they're not going to be, you know, large changes to sort of change up people's expectations, because fundamentally people have been preparing for, you know, the Race World First and their own, you know, journey for quite a while. We don't want to sort of like take that away from them.
Okay, so that's a little bit different than the answer I got there. I mean, I still think it's the same. Like, if something, like, ideally, there should just be a bunch of changes going into Heroic to where it's as close as possible and you get rid of a lot of the outliers and then keep it small. But I still think that they're basically on the same page with that. Same bottom line, yeah. Cool, fuck yeah.
Okay, so there will be like percentage damage changes, usually not like major changes to rotation or something like that, unless it's really required, I assume.
Yeah, it'll be similar to what we did in Dragonflight, where, you know, before Mythics unlocks and before Heroic unlocks, we'll be taking a look at classes and specs that are performing or overperforming and making adjustments for sure.
Yeah, and they've done that before. I love the zoom cut right when I pause as well. Love that. But yeah, it was a bit different in Dragonflight though, I think. Right? Because they would the Friday before Mythic, and then they would do whatever changes they were gonna do. And then the Monday before Mythic, if there's any remaining, they would do like minor changes there. Okay. But the difference is, at least this is what I think. I've heard Blizzard kind of push back to me about this because they do have internal like tuning tools, or I guess tuning information that we don't have, I believe. But I also believe, and I know, that they use Warcraft logs. They use sample size data from the community. They use everything we use plus whatever they have, right? I firmly believe that the Friday of a heroic week, right? So thousands and thousands of runs and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands or millions of individual parses they can kind of look at. I think the Friday after a heroic week versus the Friday of there's literally no content to do, and then Mythic is right after it, I think they have more information because there's literally millions of more iterations of people actually playing the game and seeing how their damage is, right? Like even in the Race World First, for example, we will be able, if Blizzard really cared, they would be able to watch our raids walkthroughs on Sunday and Monday off stream, which we are like practicing raid fights with characters that are extremely fucking geared. Not as geared as they'll be on Mythic Week because you won't spend your crest yet, but like extremely geared, and they have full heroic tier. So that's like a pretty good fucking tuning knob, right? The best players in the game playing with a lot of close to what gear you're going to have and see that. So I think they just objectively have more information now than they would before. That being said, I don't think the tuning in Dragonflight was necessarily bad. Like, historically speaking, I don't think that Dragonflight with no heroic week... Okay, the first raid was unbelievably bad, but I think that was like the first raid with class inspectries, so maybe... It wasn't like that for the rest of the expansion, so I think Season 1 maybe gets a little bit of a... Not a pass, but like it's understood why that happened. But this expansion, having a heroic week, I think the tuning should be better because they should just have more information to go off than whatever they have internally.
Okay, all right, sounds interesting. Another question that has been something on my mind for a long time, and I'm not sure if you can say anything to it, but basically my understanding of the way Mythic works currently, the Mythic rating, the difficulty, to me it seems like that the skill gap between the World First guilds and like an average Mythic guild is grown so large that I feel like they're playing different games almost, right?
True.
And I can see how that causes lots of issues when it comes to tuning and the bosses and the difficulty itself. Do you think that is a problem? Do you is that something you think about? Is it something that you think is okay, or that this is something that you want to tackle, or what is your stance on that?
Interesting question. It's a good question.
They answered that, or I think who was interviewed? It was Ian, right? That was interviewed by MareclianOnline. We reacted to that like yesterday or 2 days ago, something like that. It was yesterday. He answered this, and I think these interviews were done at the same time with different people. So interesting to hear different perspectives. But what was the answer Ian gave?
So I think, you initially framed it in terms of class tuning. Yeah. I think there's two different aspects of it. There's class tuning and there's content tuning. Content tuning, I think, really, for the most part, isn't taking into account or focused on that very cutting edge, the very, very top players. Yeah. We're designing Mythic Plus dungeons and we're balancing them for the hundreds of thousands of people who do Mythic Plus dungeons. And then there's this open-ended progression system that will let the very best, prove themselves at the top. For rating, I will say that during the first week or two on Mythic, we do tune the very last couple of bosses in the raid with the World First guilds in mind, because they're the only guilds in the world that are going to be seeing those bosses at that time. It doesn't matter that Farak is nearly impossible for most cutting-edge guilds, because those cutting-edge guilds are still working on, boss 3, boss 4. Sure. By the time they get to Farak will be easier. And so we wouldn't really be doing anyone a service if we tuned Farak for cutting-edge guilds when, Liquid and Echo and Method are getting there.
It was like, we don't really tune anything for the top players in this game, except for literally the last 2 bosses in the first 2 weeks when no one else is there, which is true. Let's see if they give any other kind of answer to that.
Yeah, there is a very wide range of players. There's the Race World First folks, and there's folks who are pushing Hall of Fame, and there's folks who are just doing Mythic normally, and that's just Mythic Flow. So there's a very wide range of skill expressions among players. And it is something we consider. It's, why after certain bosses have been defeated at the race world first, we do sort of gradual or, sometimes heavy nerfs. That's sort of the plan. It's something to keep in mind. This time around, our approach is to use the Severed Strands buff, which is sort of I think that's what it is.
Stacking.
It's a gradual sort of buffing of player damage and healing over the course of the raid. So like months into the raid, your damaging needs to go up a little bit. And that gives us basically more agency where players feel like they're getting stronger, and we don't have to sort of like keep nerfing bosses for the players to make sure they're making progress. So yeah, it's something to be taken into account. It's a very large skill gap, and that is something that we certainly keep in mind.
Yeah, the thing is only some things can be nerfed by gear and power. Actually, I think a lot more than people think, maybe. But like Tindril, for example, like if you had 3-second seeds, and maybe more importantly, when you soaked a second seed, you instantly killed everyone, rather than just being like unable to soak a second seed. I mean, you could have all the power in the world, it still would have taken... You could have been like 50% stronger than us and have 50, and I'm not making this up, like 50% more health, and you still would have wiped about the same amount of times, right? So like, I think there's certain mechanics that have to be... They're just too hard once you start going down the guild ladder. But I do think that not only the stacking raid buff, but I think the fact that your eye level compared to ours, not exactly, but the difference between those should be 8 eye levels more in this expansion or this patch specifically. That's a fucking huge amount of power alone before even you get to the other shit. Like the eye level that you guys kill this boss at compared to us will be 8 higher than it was in a Mirror Soul. That's a massive difference just with the upgrade path. Also, the stacking buff on top of that scales, right? So they'll blast. Also, it kind of depends on the raid. Like, not every raid has a Tindril type thing. Like, you can go back for the last couple of expansions and, like, certain bosses would be made hella fucking easy. Like, Rygalon. Rygalon was a really, really fucking hard and great second to last boss. But Rygalon with a stacking buff and gear would get smoked by every guild. It was pretty much only difficult because of checks, right? There was not a lot of mechanically difficult things about that boss at all, actually. So I think... like, it depends on the second to last boss. Tindril is kind of like a historic example of scaling power buffs not probably helping you that much there. But I think for the normal WoW raid, a lot of the issues that people in the community have right now, and I do think it's a big problem, is, hey, you're making these things for, even though the Race World First is streamed to hundreds of thousands, it is actually like 100 people in the race doing it. I could see like how many people had to suffer through a boss like Tindril just because you're making this game for these people for this amount of time. Or not nerfing it fast enough or whatever. I think most of those problems are actually being directly addressed in this expansion, and I think that problem will be significantly less. That being said, the current version of Silken Court, I think, will murder people kind of similar to Tindril. Actually, I don't think that's true. I think Silken Court is pretty strat dependent, and I think once you guys copy what the top couple guilds end up doing, or the best thing between the both of us, I think the fight won't be as hard once you have like really good positioning and stuff.
Okay, interesting. I think the Severed Strands buff is also like it helps with player progression, considering the new system that we have with the upgrades, right? Because it feels like a lot of the upgrades that we get are really early on, and then at some point your player power progression kind of stops. So I think the Severed Strands buff and continuing downwards, I think gives the guilds that cope that maybe next time they can do it if they're really close to cleaning loss. So I think that's kind of important as well.
That's cool,
So I like that a lot. So recently you've announced...
Why are you guys all doing it as an anonymous gifter? Are you doing that out of spite because I said to not do that to be safe? I'm trying to help. It's like you're doing it like as a bit. Like, haha, he said not to do this. I'm going to fucking do it.
Or you apply changes to Mythic class disorders.
It's such a weird bit to
basically
commit
they're not
to.
going to be as strong anymore as they were in Dragonflight, where you just use loads and loads of AoE disrupts and stuns to stop the casts from happening.
Sure.
And now the lockdown that happens on these casts is going to be a lot shorter.
Yeah.
Which means that interrupts are going to be more important in return. Now, there are some classes that either don't have interrupts at all, like priests, and there's classes that are really long cooldowns away from this. Is that something we think might be a problem in your classes? Do you maybe address if it is? Or do you think that's just something that is like people have to work?
Well,
We've had some answers to this recently. I don't want to paraphrase a bunch of them. I want to hear what they say.
I'll talk about the Mythic Plus changes some of this, and if you want to dive into the class side, I think that would be a great way to cover this. Well, first and foremost, we always look at the tools the players have when we're designing the encounters in dungeons and Mythic Plus specifically. And the changes you're talking about where it stops no longer completely interrupt the cast and then it just goes off again. Really, it's not just about emphasizing kicks, it's about emphasizing deliberate play and strategy in the way that you pull the dungeon and the way that you choose to engage in certain packs and mobs. So it's about giving players more choices, or basically making them have to make more interesting choices or have to grapple with that in the same way. And obviously that's a little bit of a balance when some classes have some abilities and their classes don't have the same, they have one to do them, etc. But the overall intention for all of the Mythic Plus changes that we made this time is to encourage a more deliberate play style. It basically slow down the, like, we're gonna Zerg every single pack, AE it all up, burn it down, and then move on to the next thing. And actually, some of those abilities you should have to choose. No, I want to grapple with this versus this, and I'm not going to pull that nag because I know we don't have a stop for that or not a big pick for that quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a fascinating way to deal with this because Mythic Plusers will tell you that it's boring, that the correct solution is to pull everything and then rotate through the same stops, and that's what defines every pack, and every pack feels the same. And they'll acknowledge that as a problem, but also their solution to it is like that a lot of that stuff will go off, and then they're like, well, we don't want to pull one pack at a time and stuff like that. So it's like finding the balance of, I think Mythic Plusers will tell you that like stops and how many stops some classes have and how few some other have and how defined the game is by them is a problem. But I think they're directly trying to address that by doing this, but then it just feels like the mobs have infinitely more mechanics, right? So I think you'll be able to tell after the season. I think this season and the fact they haven't backed down from that is a pretty strong stance that they like really want to see how this plays out. And I don't know, I think a version of Mythic Plus where you're not walking up to a pack and worrying about a stop rotation just sounds like a more fun version of Mythic Plus to me. Even if it means you're dealing with more mechanics, that sounds better to me. But that's not necessarily what's happening. Like, in a way, you can almost brute force it by bringing even more stops, and even though you're not stopping the thing's internal cooldown, you can just kind of stop it 15 times in a row sometimes, and maybe that's enough time to kill it, And the other change they're making is they're putting power back in interrupts. And I think that's actually good. I don't know if the way they're doing it is correct, but I think the idea that you put more power back in the actual spells that interrupt casts, like literal interrupts, kicks, things like that, because like the power of kicks seems so dog shit when your character and everyone in your group probably combined has 15 total buttons that can AoE kick everything. It makes the spells that actually interrupt things completely insignificant, which is so funny. This is like full circle from like Arcane Torrent fucking existing in Legion, but like I actually think that philosophy makes a lot of sense. I think adding much more importance into the actual kicks, and this is a way to do that. I'm not saying it's the right way to do it, but having a kick be singularly way more fucking impactful than a stop, I think is really good for the game. But I don't know if they're going to... I think it's going to take some time in this season. I'm really interested in a lot of things in the upcoming Mythic Plus. Probably won't go into it because maybe they ask about it, because like high Mythic Plus, yeah, okay, I think they maybe get into it later.
Sorry, I just wanted to have a follow-up question to that, if that's
totally.
okay. So you're saying that, and this is something that I've seen in the changes as well, that it looks like you're trying to stop players from doing bigger pulls and just surging everything down, as you say, just AoE stopping it. To me, it feels like that is what I like doing them. Like, I like doing these big pulls and pressing my big AoE button, seeing like big numbers. Right? I think a lot of players really do enjoy that. And whenever I think there's changes that are being applied to the game that stop me from doing that, especially in a forceful way, because if it's just more difficult to do it, then I know, okay, we just have to play better to execute that.
Yeah.
But if there's something that really completely stops you from doing that, like certain auras that have AoE damage reduction, stuff like that, then I feel like, okay, no matter what I do, I can't do this big pull.
Sure.
And is this something that you're aware that people like these big pulls and you're still trying to stop that?
Totally. And like, I enjoy that as well. A lot of people do, but if you follow the through line, if the progression of gameplay is bigger and bigger pulls, and all you're doing is, hey, I'm basically trying to pull as much of the dungeon as I possibly can, and then burn it down and move on to the next one and do that. It forces a specific group line. It forces all of the interesting mechanics that might actually make one dungeon different from another dungeon starts to like get sort of rubbed
Fucking
down,
facts.
so that everything starts to feel the same. Running different Mythic Plus dungeons.
You see what I'm talking about? Bro, I've only heard this guy in like maybe 3 or 4 interviews, and that's my entire relation with him. But he is constantly fucking speaking the truth. That's all I'm saying.
Very, very repetitive. And then ultimately in the long run, It means that some players don't have the option to participate if they don't want to play one of the classes that are specifically
Facts.
required to do that. So, like, thinking about Demon Hunter Tank in the last seasons that were like, in order to do what you were talking about, you had to absolutely have a Demon Hunter Tank in your group. You had to have certain classes and those kinds of things. And so this is like, it's the challenge with game design is always like, okay, can we not turn it back all the way so that we're absolutely forcing you to play like that, but can we dial the knob back a little bit and then see how it goes? Get feedback, see if it's like, oh no, nobody likes this. We've gone too far. Okay, let's turn the knob back a little bit more.
Yep.
And then see. And I think really,
which is why they're like super doubling down on making sure that they try that this season, and I think that's the right thing to do. I think the reason behind that he just said and all the reasoning they have given for these changes are problems that need to be solved. This is a solution they think they have. They don't always get that right? Private ores still exist as the worst possible solution to the weak ore issue, but like, you know, they could end up doing it, and he's saying, hey, we'll try it out, and you know what, if it totally fails, we'll look at it from a different angle. But I actually respect them actually trying it instead of just immediately reverting to people complaining, which you want to listen to your community, but we're wrong a lot. And we're averse to change. And sometimes change can be good, and you don't know it yet because it's just different, and you don't like it being different. And I respect them sticking to this.
Players are still going to be doing a lot of this, and it'll be maybe slightly smaller goals than what they've been in the past, or with some of the tank debuffs that have happened. Like, it might have to be a little bit more careful, and then we'll see how progression goes throughout the entire expansion.
One more follow-up question.
Sure.
Priests.
Oh, priest getting interrupted. I mean, it's Michael mentioned. Really,
Facts,
our goal is
facts, such facts, actually. Like, if you're going to put all the power back in the into interrupts, how are you going to make it so there's exactly 2 specs in the entire game that don't have one? It needs to be said.
to try to give players the tools that they have to basically succeed in different environments. Priest getting interrupts, I can't speak to whether that is or isn't happening. Over the course of Dragonflight, we saw a lot of class changes. A lot of things are on sort of the menu. Hero talents are another part of the game that we're going to be looking, very closely at. We've added a lot of crowd patrol hero talents. We're going to be looking at them, making sure that they're going in the right direction, that they're tuned properly. So I think players can expect a lot of class updates and spec updates, and honestly, even hero talent updates going into more within. But specifics for things like priest getting interrupts, can't really talk.
Okay. And other classes getting shorter interrupts? Like me?
The solar beam is still 1 minute, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, but it's an AoE silence, right? So
she's like, bam, bro, this body language is crazy. She's like, she's not saying a word here, but she's hitting him with the strong, don't give me any of that shit. Look at this. Look at this.
It's an AoE silence, right?
Look at this. Look at this.
There.
Come on, what the fuck are you talking about? That's what she said. Let's fucking go, Naguura.
That's true.
Stay big.
No current plans on changing solar beam for now, at least not for launch.
Okay. I had to check.
Haha, laughing, but not fucking happy.
Alright, then I
Remember
was
that.
wondering about when it comes to class balancing. We've seen a lot of class balancing, or usually we see a lot of class balancing at the start of patches and the start of expansions that are more focused on the grids, right? On single target damage profiles, and to make sure that everyone's kind of in line, everyone is valuable.
What is it? Bybee feels like he knows his stuff and explains it well. I don't know why I paused the video to read that because we just talked about this, but yeah, I mean, you can tell a lot of times, but he's not someone who feels like he has to talk all the time. He takes his time, he thinks, he addresses your points in the order you brought them up, and he just fucking speaks the truth. He's very... I've never worked with this guy once. I did not meet him when I was at Blizzard, when I went and saw, like, the WoW setup, but he just strikes me as someone that is definitely knows what the fuck they're doing. I'll
At
ride
the start
into
of
it.
patches and the start of expansions that are more focused on the grids, right? On
Yeah.
single target damage profiles, and to make sure that everyone's kind of in line, everyone is valuable. But when it comes to a class, I think balancing a class in particular when it comes to damage profiles is something that has to be for the whole season, right? And if changes only happen at the start of a season and not too many changes happen later, it feels like, oh, the meta has evolved like 2 months in, and now this is like something that everyone plays, and all the other classes are kind of being left wherever they are, and they're not being buffed or nerfed as much. Is that something that you want to maybe do differently in the War Within?
What seemed to happen in Dragonflight is there was unquestionably more dungeon tuning and class tuning in Season 1. And I said this at the time, and I believe this is true. There was actually more tuning in Season 1 than I think there has been in entire expansions before, like in the last 10 years. It was insane. And what was the result? It was inarguably the most balanced the game has ever been in Raid and Mythic Plus. It stayed pretty balanced in Raid the whole expansion, but in Mythic Plus, it was crazy. There was like, you could invite like 13 or 14 different specs to the highest keys. That's never been true. And that was really fucking good. What is also true is they stopped tuning as much. After the first patch of every expansion, I don't know exactly how WoW works, but it seems like they have a percentage of their workforce work on the new expansion. I don't think, like, they're not going to have 100% effort into the current expansion the whole time while releasing an expansion every 2 years. That's just reality. And I think what we saw is those tuning updates just without a doubt slowed down as the whole expansion happened. And I assume it's that. I've never heard that. They'll probably address that here. But hopefully, I wish she was actually a little bit more direct in that. Why can we expect so much balancing at the beginning of the expansion and so much less later on?
And more and less focus changes later on this season.
It's an interesting sort of problem that you're bringing up, right? Because it's sort of the same boat of people have picked their spec for whatever content they're doing, in which case Mythic Plus. So if we go through and we massively change, how one class spec performs, people like they sort of like, well, I was going to play this, but now now we nerfed it, so I can't really play that anymore. So to a certain extent, we do want to basically try not to upset meta too much. That being said, considering Mythic Plus is such a vast part of the game, for some people it's the only thing that they do, which is great. Same for content like PvP. When we talk about tuning, we do talk about Mythic Plus. We do talk about PvP. We have separate conversations entirely for like things like battleground balance versus arena balance, same with Mythic Plus balance versus raid balance. So it's certainly top of mind for us. But when it comes to sort of the larger sweeping changes, we try to sort of get those established as early as possible in a season. That way, if players are trying to push for their title, 2 or 3 months in, they don't feel like we just like pull the rug out on them. So that's sort of our thinking.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed when it comes to class, like I agree that changing classes halfway through, like people are going to be disappointed, but and plus is something that like rank 1 title, for example, happens at the end of the season. So even if you change something mid-season, I feel like people technically do have enough time to maybe play another character or focus on something else if they wanted to. But I guess the problem is, which did happen in the past, when a strong class got nerfed, all of a sudden the score that people were able to achieve with a certain class is not achieved.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is a huge problem. So I mean, I see the issues, but I just I wish classes would be balanced more.
For sure.
Everyone agrees with
I see
that.
that it's from
What does he say to that?
It's just a very large design challenge at the end of the day, especially with hero talents now. We're not doubling specs, but we almost kind of are. And then you apply that to not just Mythic Plus, but content like Delves, because a ton of players are going to be playing Delves. Delves is going to be a huge part of the game. So we have to take that into account. It's just a lot of variables.
Yeah, but you don't have
that
to. Yeah, that's true, but absolutely no. As long as delves are completable, absolutely no one is gonna be mad that like other people can do delves slightly faster than them, right? As long because it's solo content. As long as you're able to complete it. I mean, you don't want your class to be dog shit, right? But like, no one's gonna be like, oh man, I bet delves are so fucking crazy for that class, right? Totally different. Because if you think about why do people care about Mythic Plus, right? Why is Mythic Plus balance so important? It's because when your class isn't good, you don't get invited. Your, in quotes, queue times are like either infinite or very, very fucking long, right? That never exists in Delves. So I think the idea that like things need to be tuned for Delves at the same level of Mythic Plus is like absolutely crazy. Like that's just not true. But I mean, I don't know. Delves are kind of like a Mythic Plus dungeon. I feel like if Mythic Plus balance is probably 95% true of Delve balance. Not quite, but like it's fine, maybe defensively, actually, like their defensive options are pretty important, but they're not timed, so it doesn't matter. I don't know.
Mythic Plus is certainly one of them, though. I think one thing that we are trying to accomplish a little bit differently this time around, though, when we talk about War Within, is making sure that, season over season, the quote-unquote meta feels a little bit different, at least, because I think in the past, that's been places where we can move on.
Okay, here's another question about Delves that I did not submit first. Can I still ask you?
Let's just talk about Delves.
We may not have an amazing answer for you.
I am one with the earth, by the way.
Since we're speaking about class balancing,
let's
Delves,
fucking go.
I was wondering because, of course, you can do Delves by yourself, and it's probably incredibly difficult to make sure that we reach
Call
and
me
every
Melvin.
spec can do the Delves like. So there's balance between one another, right? So a tank has the same like.
This is a good question. This is a really good question. Like I don't know this right now, but I imagine that like the difficulty of a delve feels totally different whether you're a tank, healer, or DPS, right? Like I can't believe actually that doing a delve as a healer is an enjoyable experience. Maybe Blizzard like did that well somehow, But like, I feel like balancing delves based on your spec, solo or like in duo or trio with Bran, has to be so hard. Like, I just don't even know how you do that.
If you're, first of all, going to address that with the way the delve works, depending on what class you're playing at, or if you're able to change specs, like to have certain talents or abilities do more damage in delves, can balance it differently.
Well, I can talk a little bit about balance and delves. Sure, delves. Agree on the class in it. So the way delves balancing is working is actually a little bit based on some of the stuff we've done in the past that is like sort of classless instance-based content. And so what that means is that if you go in with a healer, we're able to actually tune the experience to work a little bit differently for a healer versus a tank versus DPS. So that's one side. The reality is doing damage is how you kill monsters. And so being able to do some level of damage and your ability to do that will dictate how maybe the difficulty level that you can go through in certain kinds of packs of the other monsters and the
so he's
higher end
answering.
versions of delve. That may still be true. They should still, like, the intention is that they're still accomplishable with anybody, but it may be a little bit easier for a high DPS class to get through certain things versus a healer who might take a little bit longer but can still do them, right? On the class side,
I mean, on the class side, like if, you know, let's say Resto Shaman is having a hard time versus, you know, Holy Priest or both healers, we do have tools to make it easier for certain specs, or in some cases, dare I say, even harder for certain specs if necessary, to make sure that content is similar.
So, I mean, what they can literally do is if you're an Ellie Shaman and you swap specs to Resto for some reason, I mean, the only thing that makes sense to me is shouldn't, like, every single mob just, its health should scale, and then it's just simply asking healers if they're happy and then changing those numbers around. Like, it just has to be that, right? Like it's in, you have to do damage to kill monsters. So if you are zoning in as a healer and they want it to be accessible to healers, which is true, they've said that they just have to. Is that what happens though? Like, when you zone in as a healer, do those things have less health than they do as a DPS? Has anyone tested that? Because if that doesn't happen, then like something is fucking turbo not working right. Because like healers are just gonna fucking hate that shit. It's gonna take forever. Like, yeah, you can still kill the mobs, but it's gonna take fucking forever. They should just have less health. I don't know. I feel like it has to work that way.
Okay, interesting. Okay, thank you. All right, so then I wanted to talk a little bit about the tank and healer adjustments that you talked about, or that you applied to your class. As far as I understood, the idea was that tanks are supposed to take a little bit more sustained damage. Yeah. So the healer is required to heal them a little bit more. Not to like sit there and spam heal the tank, but just to have to keep an eye on the tank. And if the tank does not get any healing by the healer for a long time, then they should eventually die and shouldn't be able to survive forever. Once that changes were applied, I talked to some of the tanks and I did some dungeons myself on beta. And some tanks said that it didn't have as much impact as they thought it would have by the
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. I didn't know where she was going with this question, but I remember, myself included, hands are up, right? I did it when I read those changes. I tanked for many, many years, and I was just like, this is fucking bullshit. Tanks should be self-sufficient. Fuck healing tanks. And I was like, this is such a bad idea. Fuck everything. Fuck, right? But it turns out that I have not heard a tank say they thought the changes were dog shit. Like you're basically, the self-sufficient tanks are still able to do it. It's just a little closer. And the classes that are not built to be self-sufficient require a little more, but reduce a little bit more damage, which is actually how it should be, right? So I think from what I can tell, again, I should not be the arbiter of like the community's feeling on this. I don't even currently tank. This is just what I've heard from people, is that the nerfs were actually pretty good, right? Like, if every tank is self-sufficient and it's like they're really powerful, all of them, and it's really easy to do that, that's actually bad, because like then it makes your skill as a tank matter way less, and it also makes tanks super homogenous. So like, for example, right now as a prot warrior, you will eventually need healing, but you take actually no damage as a tank. That is okay that exists, different to like what is, I think, the polar opposite of that in Blood DK, for example, right? Now, Paladins are in a really weird spot where they're like a little bit of both. They have like, what they have is way worse than Warriors' defensives, but they have supposed to have some kind of healing, but WoG is turbo dog shit. It's like, I'm not saying all the tanks are made really well right now, but it sounds like the base change they made a lot of sense. And I was definitely wrong in criticizing it super early. I just want to throw that out there.
And some people said, okay, did they notice it? But only with some healers, maybe not with others. So these changes that you did, do you think that it hit the mark and it was intended the way it was had? Or do you think that that's still something you're working on and like maybe changing some knobs throughout?
Sure. Oh, do you?
I'll jump in.
Sure, go for it.
I'm a big Mythic Plus player, so I'm excited about this changes. What I thought was funny about this one was that the community conversation around the Blue Coast was a lot bigger than the impact of the changes themselves, right? Everybody was up in arms. Everybody that I was watching was talking about, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing this. It's going to be so much harder. But then when you actually play it, it's not that impactful. It does change things up a little bit. It does, it's about tuning knobs. We tuned it just a little bit one way, and we'll see how it goes. And that increases maybe the value of health stones in your dungeon, or it increases
He's talking about you. I know.
survivability a little bit more.
I know.
You might choose.
I admit it. I've been admitting it. I overreacted that for sure. I will overreact to things sometimes and totally admit when I'm very wrong. That was me. Wait, someone in chat said, at the end of the day, everyone enjoyed the way Mythic Plus was. I don't know why they're making such drastic changes. Well, okay, how deep are you talking about the stops? Or are you talking about, because I actually think that Mythic Plusers are Mythic Plusers are permanently mad about everything, but they were definitely not happy with the way a lot of things were going, right? So I think things being addressed is good. Continually designing your game is good.
Talent first and survivability you might not have chosen in the past, but the reality.
I want to hear that again.
I can't believe they're doing that. Right? The community conversation around the Blue Coast was a lot bigger than the impact of the changes themselves, right?
Facts.
Everybody was up in arms. Everybody that I was watching was talking about, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing this. It's going to be so much harder. But then when you actually...
Yeah, that was me. Well, I didn't say it was going to be that much harder. I think harder is good. Harder but possible is actually ideal. And I think what it was before was it was easy to be self-sufficient. I already explained this, but yeah. Yeah, he's probably talking about me, I guess. Well, actually, that last part makes me think not.
It does change things up a little bit. Those, it's about tuning knobs. We tuned it just a little bit one way, and we'll see how it goes. And that increases maybe the value of health stones in your dungeon, or it increases survivability a little bit more. You might choose some talent first and survivability you might not have chosen in the past. But the reality is, right now, they're feeling pretty good about it. But we'll see as the season kicks off and things progress, we'll definitely be paying some close attention.
All right, so then I have some more questions about that change.
But is it smart to make the role with the least people playing it harder? Yeah, true. I mean, I guess it depends on where you're playing, right? Like, I think tanking, for example, in Raid, after the first, couple weeks, is a role where they could add some difficulty and it would not be bad. In Mythic Plus, I think tanks are already, the average tank player definitely has way too much on their plate, and the success of the dungeon too much hinges on them. Any tank at a mid to low level could tell you that. So that is kind of interesting, but I don't know. This is more just on the pure gameplay aspect. I think it's a thought to be had. There aren't a ton of tanks, but I mean, I don't know. At the high level, there's not a lot of tanks for sure. Like in NA, I think there's 4 or something that really tank with high level groups. And I guess you could argue that they're making that even better. I don't think those players want tanking to be free. As far as I could tell, talking to Dorky, is right now, tanking actually isn't that hard because you reach the key level where your group is dying before you are truly at the point where, as a tank, you need to buckle down and figure out how to survive and go full defensive talents. That doesn't happen in most seasons. It's you are definitely hard ceilinged by the rest of your team, really, before you, as a tank specifically, really start looking at that. So I feel like if tanks like getting the shit beat out of them, right? The most fun thing to do as a tank, for sure. Tanking mobs that you feel like can't kill you is boring as fuck. That's why raid tanking is boring when you have gear, right? If you are a tank and you want to challenge yourself, you want the pack to be very lethal, and you have to problem solve your way out of that. That is what makes tanking interesting. It's what makes healing interesting, just in a different way, right? If nothing could ever kill you, healing would be boring. But if things are constantly trying to kill you and it's at least controllable, that's a problem you have to solve, and then you fit in damage wherever you can. So I think for the higher level tank players, that the changes were actually probably good. It'll also separate them from other players. But lower level, I think you're right. Yeah, it could be a bad reaction.
And because you also mentioned that change might reduce...
What is it? As a Blood DK, I love being unkillable. Yeah, but you wouldn't love being unkillable if it was easy, right? What's fun as a Blood DK is by playing really well and making really good decisions and really greeting death strikes. You have fun by dancing around that. At least all the players that I play with feel that way, right? If it was just the buttons you press didn't matter on DK and you automatically lived through anything, that's not true. But let's just say that was true. All of you would have less, I will say most of you, there's some moles maybe, but most people are not want to do that. You want to, like, as a monk, right? As a monk, then you're really getting shit on. You want to, like, really ride high stagger and, like, get, like, really value purifies, and, like, you can see the reward and the payoff for the decision to be a little bit greedy sometimes. And then you can also get punished for that. And then that's something, a way you can get better. I don't think the whole, I think the whole, like, everyone wants it to be easy thing. This is the whole mole people conversation, right? The difference between a casual and a mole person is there's a lot of casuals that play games casually that do enjoy being challenged as a way that video games are fun for them, right?
Becoming group-like damage, because that was something that in Dragonflight was a big problem in my opinion, at least, that the survivability of the group was incredibly important, and it was like the main thing that was holding you back usually, and not necessarily the damage they were doing. And that's something that I personally didn't enjoy, and I think I got a lot of feedback from other people as well that said they would rather like make sure that the damage is something that they can optimize, and that's holding them back, rather than just dying.
Wait, what is it? As someone who isn't a tank, I want tanking to be easy so more people will play it. See, but that thing is like, you're like, I don't care if this thing is not fun. I just want to, like, have more groups be available, which makes sense if you're just thinking at your own pace. But I actually don't know if that's true. Like, if tanking was just an objective, it was just a joke at all levels. It was just twice as easy to survive all the time. You're thinking that would increase the amount of people doing it, and I don't know if that's actually true. Like for example, people are more often to want to DPS through farm because they can at least feel something. Bro, if you're a tank or a healer in a guild, you know this feeling of how boring farm is because you're not challenged. It is infinitely less fun for you, and you are more likely to want to post at a raid because of it. That is a fact, right? Something being easy, if they would just make tanking a total fucking joke, I actually don't think that would make more people do it. I think there is an issue with you know, certain groups or the certain levels, especially, like, running out of tanks, and the tanks feeling like there's too much pressure on them. And if you were to just make living easy, maybe it would just be all the other things. I think it's really like the homework aspect. It's about having to know the routes and everything where you feel like you're letting people down. The actual gameplay of playing your class, having no stakes to it and just seeming to be solved before you even play it. This isn't really how the game is, but just using that in an argument, like, I don't think that would make more people want to do it at all.
Having any defensive left, and they just can't do anything about it. Do you think that this change with the tanks is actually gonna affect that aspect? So they, the person who has to heal the tank more, that you're tuning back the incoming group-wide damage, so that the group survivability is not gonna be as important as it was in Dragonflight?
Dude, sorry, I went on such a long rant there that I didn't listen to any of that. Sorry, I'm gonna rewind it.
A big problem in my opinion, at least, that the survivability of the group was incredibly important, and it was like the main thing that was holding you back usually, and not necessarily the damage they were doing. And that's something that I personally didn't enjoy, and I think I got a lot of feedback from other people as well that said they would rather like make sure that the damage is something that they can optimize, and that's holding them back, rather than just dying to a boss without having any defensives left, and they just can't do anything about it. Do you think that this change with the tanks is actually gonna affect that aspect? So they, the person who has to heal the tank more, that you're tuning back the incoming group-wide damage, so that the group survivability is not going to be as important as it was in Dragonflight?
That's the intent. But it
oh, interesting. Okay, that actually makes a lot of fucking sense. Like that problem being solved can also solve this. So that actually, like, directly aligns on.
It depends on the fight. It depends on the dungeon. It depends on the situation. The goal is not to make it more complex, but to change where the complexity is. So you're focusing a little bit more on the tank. You're focusing a little bit less.
That's a really good interview.
You're still going to have to focus on keeping your buff. Yeah. People will have to use their defensives at appropriate times and just be, careful that way. And that will still continue to be a part of it.
Okay. And if this change is not going to affect that group survivability as much as you wanted it to, do you still consider nerfing defensives of damage dealers across the board to kind of fix the whole situation of the
do I do a little mini rant?
Tuned so highly because the damage dealers have so many defenses available to them.
Yeah, this might be a good class.
I probably don't need to do it. You guys have heard this a million times. I think one of the biggest problems in the game right now is the amount of defensives and the potency of defensives makes it almost an impossibility for them to create challenging situations that try to kill your character that are not just preemptive. You must have popped a defensive already one-shots or else you're definitely dead. That's kind of the only way to kill you. They can't, like, the old days of your health linearly going down and eventually your peripheral vision's like, oh, my health is going down, I might need to make a decision. You know how that doesn't happen anymore? It's because there's just twice as many fucking defensives in the game. For most classes, it's not true for every class. If you're a class with less defensives and you're like all up in arms, like obviously this is about the whole game, not specifically about you. But I just, it's not a surprise that everything in Dragonflight was like your whole raid is going to die instantly and then one healer pops a cooldown and everyone's healed. The times the game has been like this, and it has existed before Dragonflight, is just so much worse than the Shadowlands BFA style of the way your raid takes damage. But dungeons, raids, everything, it's less fun to heal. It's less fun to heal where all of your heals instantly top people when you pop cooldowns, and then if you don't have a cooldown up, everyone's instantly dead. Like having it be more nuanced than that, where your actual base kit does more healing, but it's like you're slowly filling up health bars and health bars are slowly going down, so there's constant decision making rather than just instantly lay on handsing everyone with every spell, right? I think personally, everything that I just said is an obvious problem, but I just think personally that the amount of defensives and the potency of defensives in this game, and the fact that versatility exists, by the way, why the fuck is that a stat in PvE? That all of that contributes to them having to do this. It's a cause and effect, right? If they want to do, let's just say Blizzard fully understood this and they wanted to make very linear damage intake similar to how it used to be. I could show you 5 clips right now from old bosses and explain exactly what I mean, but I think you have heard this before. They could do that. You know what would happen? The game would be easy as fuck because there are just too many answers to that. And when you have too many answers to that, you have to do more. You have to make that hit of damage do 80% of your health instead of 40. And then you're dead from 80 to 0 or maybe 100 to 0 because you didn't press something before it even happened to you. And I just feel like that's way less fun. Anyways, you guys have heard this before. But yeah, I'm interested in what they say about this for sure.
It's a little bit of an arms race, right? Like we buff player defensives via things like hero talents, so raid damage used to go up, so healers have more to do. But
it's more. It's not just more to do. It is the type and the way your damage is received is right. Like if this is your health bar, right? This is your health bar here. And the level at which your health bar goes up and down, I guess this is a really shitty way to do this, but let's just say this is a line. You have currently at 90% health, right? And as I am selecting this bar going up and down is your current HP. How the game used to be was like the entire raid would just be like going down a little bit. A healer would pop a cooldown. Okay, we're sustaining. We're going up a little bit. Now it's like mechanic happens, poof, down to here. Fucking one healer pops a cooldown all the way up. And it's so spiky and dog shit because of the amount of ways you can mitigate damage in this game, right? It's not just the healers have more to do. It's that the way that everyone interacts with the damage you take is just less fun and actually like makes you the way just having to proactively think about the damage you take is just way less fun than reacting to it happening to you in real time. Even in hard content. This has existed in super hard content for a long time the other way.
Players don't hit those defensives in some groups. You know, not everyone's playing at the highest Keystone level here for having a bad time. That is definitely something we talked about quite a bit in terms of actually adjusting players' defensives for content like Mythic Plus. It's difficult because then we're adjusting defensives for players that are only doing delves or only doing world content. There's a lot of people to consider, and also raids. I don't think for now we go so far as to be hitting players' defensives. But like Michael said, this is just the very beginning. There's a lot of knobs that we need to tune still, and we'll be tuning going into Season 1 of The War Within. So, time will tell. But as of right now, we have no plans to sort of hit player defensives.
As we learned earlier, when I complained about the tank changes, I can definitely, like everyone else, be super wrong, but I actually don't think that the way that the damage you take in this game will change until they address defensives across the entire game. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
They clearly said that might be the case, and we deal with that later, and we're not doing it now. But that's just how I feel about it.
I'm going to keep asking the question. Asked last time as well.
Sure. Sure.
I wanted to know, because in my opinion, there's 2 things that can hold you back in the present. For you, like to time it or not time it. Like 2 major things. Number 1 would be survivability. Like you're just stuck on a boss and you can't kill it because the ability just shuts you and you're running out of defensives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or manage to do the whole dungeon, but you're running out of time. So you basically we're not efficient enough, didn't do enough damage. So now a scenario where a team has like the best comm possible for this dungeon, for this situation, and has near perfect gameplay, what would you think is like the ideal scenario? Like what would be holding this group back on like the highest skill level that can do?
Okay, so I think what she's getting at, this is kind of like the conversation that people have had the whole expansion where you never feel like you have to like really ball out in a key and like time something super crazy. It's kind of like you just need to stay alive and you time it. I think she's kind of getting at that. She's saying, like, what do you want to be the challenge? Like, right now, it's basically, can we live? And then if that's it, there's no more challenge. You just successfully live and then you time it if you're among the average skill level of the people doing high keys, right? People want to be challenged on time. The only issue with time is based on your current gear level, with how infinite scaling works, is there's just going to be a key level that exists with the gear your group has where you are able to time that key. And then the next key is going to be 2 minutes harder than that. And let's say you're able to perfectly time one key. The difficulty is the timer. You have to play perfect. Cool. No deaths. And you have to own. Cool. All right. Well, the next key, if that's the case, will probably be impossible. Maybe you can innovate a little bit, but most likely impossible. And the key before that will be easy. It's really, really hard to make it based on time without like changing the way Mythic Plus works in general, because like there really is truly like one per dungeon. There's like one key level that your group would truly struggle with the time with until you get more gear or you have less gear. But this is something that people in Mythic Plus talk about all the time. And there's probably really intricate ways to design around that. And I have no idea how to design a video game, and they probably thought about this. I know Morgan Day thought about the JB. Morgan Day actually brought up the JB take, which is maybe what you do at a certain point is Mythic Plus stops scaling with damage. Who knows when that is. And actually the timer to complete it just goes down as a way to do that. That's kind of the same thing though, but it would be interesting at some. I actually really like that idea. I think that'd be cool. But I'm interested in how they specifically. She phrased it in a better way than I would. But yeah.
That's an interesting theoretical question for this expansion. Well, I think if you're pushing it the highest keys, it's because of the way we changed the affixes, right? It used to be true that on Tyrannica weeks you would really get it stumped, and that was like you just couldn't get past certain passing killers, that kind of thing. Theoretically now, every week will be the same. It'll feel the same, so you'll be pushing. It'll be more about throughput. You will probably for certain classes and certain abilities, you are going to run into like, this is the thing that is always killing me at a certain level. But I think more broadly speaking, it's going to be later.
I would go that route too. In the War Within world, I think my gut says it's going to be more like rating, where you're going to want to continue doing content over and over until you master it, and then you're going to want to figure out like, oh, I'm going to save
like
my
that.
2-minute cooldown for this pack, my 3-minute cooldown for this pack, but that didn't work out. So next time I'll do that, I'm going to move that.
That's kind of how Mythic Plus already is, right? Like that's how you tackle a key in Mythic Plus, is like you probably always do what you always do, and then you like look back on it and you're like, okay, we just need more CDs for this pack, and we can maybe, you know what I'm saying, like that's already a progression cycle that exists.
And optimizing like player damage and healer damage and tank damage is going to be a big part of it. That's my.
Yeah, it didn't really answer anything. That's fine.
I personally always think that's
I do
more
that
fun
too.
to, like, if you ran out of time at the end, or you like talk to your group,
I love
okay,
doing that,
let's
actually.
do this differently, use our coolbacks differently, try to make this pool more efficient. I feel like that's more fun than to just survive an ability once you
Totally.
have
Like
so many options to survive.
Nobody likes getting stomped and not being able to do anything.
Alright, then I have another question about hero talents. So the hero talent trees, of course, are completely new in the War Within, and there's some hero talent trees that are either.
For this interview, did she like put all of her questions on this little thing, so she's like reading it off like a little game show? I like the vibe. I like the fucking vibe of the card.
Incredibly like flashy looking and really like satisfying. And there's some hero talent trees that change your
are boring as fuck and don't change your gameplay at all. Yeah.
a lot in that regard. And then there's other hero talent trees that are maybe not as satisfying, maybe like passive talents don't impact your rotation as much, and others that are maybe not like visually as interesting as others. Is that something that you're aware of and that you're...
What did you say in chat? I wonder if we'll ever have like a skill check in game to see what percentage of players are good or not so good. What do you mean? That exists in like every game mode. What do you mean, like a binary pass fail, like show up and take this test, you failed, you're fucking bad. You know, like what are you fucking talking about?
Or like working on improving throughout the War Within, or are you not planning on doing any major changes in the hero talents?
What a weird question.
Good question. Hero talents and Heroes say they're not going anywhere. The moment that we sort of launch, they're part of your class and stack. They're evergreen.
They're called
not going
parses.
Way after War Within.
Dude,
we're going to treat them like how we
you can
treat
find someone with
classes and
insane
specs,
parses
and
that's
if
dog
Dragon
shit at
plays
the game.
anything to show for it. We've done
Doesn't mean anything.
a lot of redesigns, a lot of updates for specs and classes over that expansion. So in terms of updates for hero talents, stuff like that, certainly on the docket. In terms of visuals, we definitely have a goal of making sure that they feel visually distinct from each other. Some will naturally be more flashy. I think it's hard to be flashier than summoning 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse on like a 3-minute cooldown.
True,
Like, it's kind of hard
true,
to top
so
that.
true.
Yes.
So true. Like so many things, like the theme of some of them is so strong that like it would genuinely be impossible for like 90% of classes in this game to ever have the theme of their hero talent be as cool as Rider of the Apocalypse. It's impossible. Like, you can't do it. It is impossible to do. There could never be something in the class that you could even make up that would be that good, right? That is true. But that doesn't, I don't think it necessarily excuses like some of the really bad ones that are like not fun to play and have no theme. That being said, I don't think Blizzard is unaware of that. Like, I don't think Blizzard would tell you that they think the quality of all the hero talents is the same. It is so obviously not. But that's class and spec trees. Quality was all over the place, and some were bad and some were good 2 years ago, and now it's fucking infinitely better than that, like across the board, right? I assume the same thing will be true with hero talents.
But there's also value in something that's a little bit sort of smaller and more like passive, because not all players want to have, you know, very complex hero talent trees. So in terms of visuals, you know, we're always trying to do better there. And, you know, players can certainly expect updates in that field. In terms of passive versus complex, we understand that for some players, talents are inherently very complex. Specs already feel potentially too complex for them. So for some hero talents, we opt to make them a little bit simpler, a little bit more passive, because players essentially need to pick one or the other. So some trees will be more passive, some will be more complex. The last thing we wanted to do is have players feel like they need to sort of like, oh, every single hero talent tree gives me a new button or change something dramatically. That's not really a goal of ours.
Bad decision, IMO. I think they kind of have to do that. I don't think I think, and maybe it's not going to come from the general viewer base of my stream, but I think if every hero talent was insanely impactful, chose a new button, or changed your gameplay dramatically, I think the feedback they would get from that from the majority of the player base would be very negative. I think they have to do that. Just straight up, I just think they have to do that. And I don't think it's bad. I think there are actually some specs in this game that want a lot more from a hero talent versus others. I think there are specs in this game that absolutely don't need a ton of complexity added to what's already going on. Not every class is built the same in that way. So I don't even think it was something that you should do objectively across the board anyway. Not to mention, you can make things that are passive that are really, really sick by having those passive things matter a lot and have it be something you pay attention to. I do think the passive ones do definitely need to be carried by theme, though. Like, I know as a monk, like, Conduit kind of changes what you're doing a little bit. Literally gives you a button. And Shadowpan doesn't, really. And it feels bad when you play Shadowpan because it's also not cool. Where if, like, Rider of the Apocalypse also kind of does nothing, but it's fucking Rider of the Apocalypse. It goes fucking crazy. Both of the other ones are pretty active, so I don't think that, like, Rider being that option and being a little bit more passive is a bad thing. In fact, if you think about what part of the community would want to play, or who cares the most about the theme of Rider, it's probably more casuals, right? They love that fucking theme, was why they play DK, and it's not a surprise that that one is more passive, because I'll bet a lot of those players would not want to add a lot to Frost or Unholy.
Did anything else? And have your class and spec be dictated more by your class and spec trees.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. All right, so I have to ask one more question. Otherwise, the Mythic community is going to be mad. So
The what?
Mythic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right, let's see how this goes. I don't know if a developer's ever been asked in an interview, hey, so my class is currently super dog shit. Is there anything you guys can do about that? I don't think that's happened before. Let's see what happens here.
So the hero talents for Moonkins have been a little bit
hero
underwhelming
talent
for
angle.
most of the community,
Okay.
at least a few like that, but and my personal opinion as well. And the gameplay for Moonkin seems lackluster because we lost a kind of Polestar and we didn't really get any compensation for it. At least I feel like we didn't get as much of a gameplay compensation as Polestar was. And in addition, it feels like the damage is also a little bit lackluster too. Is that something that you're aware of and that maybe is getting addressed?
Yeah, certainly. A lot of community feedback's on our radar. We read a lot. We read Reddit. We read forums. Honestly, if someone makes a TikTok about class tuning, I'm probably going to watch it at some point. It's going to show up on my For You page. So yeah, we're aware of people's sort of complaints and feedback, whether that's positive or negative. I'm going to start from the middle of that question. In terms of sort of numerical updates to hero talents or Mythic in general, we're still planning to do, like I mentioned previously, there will be tuning passes going into Season 1 of the War Within, and there'll be tuning passes into the War Within for Season 1. So all that stuff is on the table, not just for Moonpin, but for essentially any hero talent or class of spec.
I mean, they have no other way to answer that. There's nothing you can do. When you get hit with a yo, my shit sucks. What's going on with that? You're gonna be like, yeah, game design. You know, there's no other, there's no way to
as
say
good as possible. In terms of hero talent updates or redesigns, can't really talk too much about that at this point. You know, we're happy with how they're going for launch. That being said, we are, you know, discussing future updates for Moonkin down the line, not for launch, but for a future patch, and we're looking to sort of address a lot of the pain points that the community brought up for sure.
All right, that was really good. See, I love that answer. Thank you. Then I have 2 more bonus questions.
Oh boy.
Oh, let's fucking go.
So you mentioned that you really
Oh,
do
they're
like
not even listed. The thing is called bonus questions. This is gonna be a fucking surprise.
spiders. The last time.
Wait, what did you say?
So you mentioned that you really do like spiders. The last time.
Spiders? Oh, he did talk about that,
Do
I
you?
think.
And I was wondering if you had a really interesting, cool fact about spiders that you could share with us.
Oh, that's a fascinating.
And that's all of you.
Yeah, totally. Well, I guess, man, which to choose? I think actually the one that I share that I like the most is so I have spider
Yes,
tattoos.
Oh, that goes hard as fuck. Look at
That's-
that.
This one on the top was actually a spider that I had
God
in the
damn,
office.
he is not faking that shit.
Oh,
Was a tarantula that folks in the office knew about. Some people were uncomfortable with it, so I brought it home. And unfortunately, she passed away during the pandemic. This one is one I found camping with my son, and it has, it's hard to see, but it has all its babies at the bottom. And then this bottom one was another one that when people at the office learned that I like spiders, they brought more spiders to me, which is why I now have more spiders at my desk that are sort of on display. And that was
Dude, that goes hard. Dude, he must have just thrown a tantrum when they put arachnophobia mode in the game.
the biggest one.
that is very, very.
So hopefully that's a cool fact.
Dude, I'm a spider ally, by the way. I have a bunch of spiders in my backyard during the summer. They're never there during the day, but at night, like, they, like, have their little webs out and shit. And I didn't know what to do with that. I'm the first time homeowner, so I'm like, I don't know what you do. What do you do with spiders in your backyard? And I Googled it, and they were like, don't do anything. Spiders are good. They get rid of, like, all the little insects and shit. And I was like, all right. So me and the spiders are cool. I have not killed any of those dudes. They're just out there fucking doing spider stuff, and that's cool.
But
That
I
is
like
very cool. All right. Do you also share that excitement for spiders? Or
I think
like crab song.
Arachnophobia mode is great. I don't personally mind spiders. I think they're neat.
They're not in the house. They just stay in the backyard.
As much as Michael,
They're hype.
but they're great. I'm looking forward to killing a bunch of spiders in the raid. That's for sure.
Yeah, look at his face. He's like, don't ever fucking say that again. He took that bad.
No, spiders are neat.
All right. I also saw that you really like kimchi.
I love kimchi.
Bro, kimchi goes fucking crazy. I remember when when Suki and I were living in Texas, there was this laundromat near us that was run by a Korean family, and like Suki went in there one time, and they were like, oh my god, another Korean, and instantly she was like, let me cook kimchi for you. So she would go there every now and then and get kimchi from this other family, and it was like super fucking wholesome. Apparently Suki didn't really like it. Koreans like kimchi like a very, very certain way. Like either like you like it like super sour, or just like you probably just like that home cooking shit, whatever your parents made. She didn't really like it, but she always took it because out of respect, she's like, this is fucking sick. You don't cook kimchi, it's fermented. Yeah, I don't know how cooking anything works, so spare me the terminology, but yeah, it went hard though. I fucking love me some kimchi. I put kimchi on anything, man.
Never had kimchi before.
You have to try it. You have to try it. There's so many variations. Like there's cabbage.
I live. So, what's like the best way? Like, can you recommend any kind of kimchi?
Yeah, like an
Is it
eight-
different?
Well, I think you have to start with like the radish kimchi.
Yeah, have you guys
Like
ever had like a Korean breakfast burrito? Like just a reggy ass breakfast burrito, but it's got like some kimchi and like maybe some galbi in it. Some like Korean short rib or something. Oh
Russian
my
cheese or like
fucking
classical
god.
kimchi. There's also like cubed radish, which is my personal favorite. There's Napa cabbage, which is probably the more traditional kimchi.
Is it spicy? I'm not a big fan of spice.
I wouldn't say it's very spicy, but definitely has a kick.
Okay.
So there's all types of kimchi. I'm talking about kimchi. There's red kimchi, which is traditional kimchi, and that is spicier. There's also white kimchi, which is less spicy. So maybe you should try that.
White
All right,
kimchi.
shit, let's go.
White kimchi. I grew up in Bulgaria. I grew up eating all like pickled foods.
I didn't know that.
So there's
I
not
mean,
a lot of,
I
like,
do like pickles. What is the number one pickled thing? Okay, I think it might be pickled red onions. I've never had something with pickled red onions on it and it was bad. Pickled red onions go crazy. Or just maybe pickled jalapenos. But yeah, I mean most people's interaction with jalapenos is eating them pickled. But yeah, I mean pickled jalapenos go crazy.
Equivalent
Super
foods
good.
to that here. There's like pickled vegetables, and that's hardly the same thing. And
Pickles are the #1 pickled thing. Do you guys know that Sang eats pickles just straight out of the jar and he eats them long ways like corn?
I just really like the taste of kimchi. It reminds me of home.
Okay, really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna try it.
You should. Yeah, it's great.
All right, thank you so much for
Thank you so much.
questions. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, of course. Pleasure meeting you.
All right. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, such a nice little ending screen. All right, that was great. Naguura's a really good interviewer.